Chapter 3. The Powers That Be. The order was still murmuring in confusion when a very tall member on a back row stump leapt to his feet. Merman Vini. Merman's dark hair was slicked back, framing a wide forehead and sharply angled eyebrows. Beneath those were teeny tiny eyes that looked like black dots drawn in with a magic marker rather than things that could be used for seeing. But Merman seemed to have no trouble glaring at Ralphagon. He spoke in a loud growling voice that made you think he might go for your throat after he finished speaking. Or if he was in a bad mood while he was mid-sentence. "Old man, what are you talking about?" he snarled. Most of the order members frowned at Merman's disrespect. Ralphagon merely raised a finger. "Please sit down, Merman," he said calmly, "and I'll explain." "Maybe you shouldn't be leading this group," Merman growled. "I, for one, am tired of your nonsense. Maybe it's time I did something about it." As he spoke, Merman shook a fist at his leader. Sparks literally jumped from his knuckles. The order members seated around him leaned away on their stumps. Ralphagon's placid expression changed to a grimace, and though he barely moved, he no longer seemed as stooped and frail as he was. The corner of a thick blue book peeked out from his overcoat, and the woods crackled with power. Ralphagon said a series of unintelligible words that sounded like he was speaking backward and forward at the same time while chewing peanut butter. There was nothing peanut buttery involved, however. Nope, Ralphagon was invoking a formula. He was controlling a law of physics. Merman tried to respond, but could only flap his mouth usefully. Nope. Uselessly. Ralphagon had taken away his ability to make sound. The order members all gasped loudly, except Merman, who couldn't. Next, Ralphagon quickly spoke several other formulas and gestured with his finger. Merman was flung back 10 feet from the group and launched high in the air with the speed of a cannonball. He jolted to a halt far above the clearing and hung there, waving his hands helplessly. He was then spun around and around like a merman-shaped top. He stopped abruptly and plummeted even faster than he'd risen. He screamed silently and flailed his limbs all the way down. Ralphagon snapped his fingers and Merman stopped instantly, all his momentum gone. He was stretched out so close to the dirt that a passing ant's antenna brushed against his nose. The ant just kept on walking. Like most creatures in the woods, it had learned to ignore the order's activities. Ralphagon wiggled his finger, and Merman returned to his feet in the exact position he'd been in before. His once neat black hair was sticking straight up, and his wide mouth quivered as if he was unsure whether to throw up, burst out crying, or do both at once. "I have told you before, Merman," Ralphagon said quietly but sternly. "I will not tolerate threats to myself or any other order member. Now take your seat and behave yourself." Merman dropped down into his stump and lowered his head in penitence. Ralphagon spoke his first formula in reverse, returning Merman's ability to speak. He then relaxed into his usual slouch. As I was saying, we will be stopping our meetings for a short time. This is not my decision. The Council of Sciences has had our weekly meeting earlier today. We had a special visitor. He frowned. An official from the Board of Administration came with complaints, several aimed at our order. We were congratulated on our fix of the Bermuda Triangle, but he raised other issues such as the Atlantis fiasco, the Yeti, 42 separate incidents of slinkies not making it all the way down sets of stairs. Willoughby Wanderby raised his hand and at Ralphagon's nod said, I'm confused. Atlantis sank many centuries ago. Surely that's not relevant now. And the Yeti, you mean abominable snowmen. If anything, those beasts are the order of biology's mix-up. Ralphagon sighed. Nobody's forgotten Atlantis. I keep getting Time Life books about it. The shipping and handling alone is outrageous. As for the Yeti, biology's keeper, Gilio Skidausa, claims they're due to the electromagnetic flux of the Northern Lights. I just see it as a marketing problem. What do you expect when you call something abominable? He sighed again. The board official suspended all science order activities until a plan can be made to fix things. One of the younger order members, a pretty woman with red hair, shook her head. Bureaucratic nonsense. Does that mean we can't do any work today? Ralphagon scratched his wrinkled chin. No, Loisauna. I think we can have one last session. Something quick and easy. Let's boost mobile phone radiation. We all could use the better phone reception, and it'll certainly cheer up the outsiders. Ralphagon leaned his cane against his stump and gestured, triggering the same powers he'd used to send Merman hurtling through the air. Now, however, Ralphagon levitated gently until he was standing atop his stump. The other order members rose from their seats and linked their hands in a circle around him. Ralphagon raised his hands in the air and wiggled his fingers. The blue book slid out of his coat, but instead of falling to the ground, as any self-respecting ordinary book would do, it floated to just above Ralphagon's fingertips. The others each spoke their own formulas, activating the various laws of physics they commanded. Rather than use this control, they simply combined their energy and willpower with Ralphagon's. Their circle glowed blue, and under Ralphagon's guidance, their influence spread quickly across the globe and strengthened mobile phones' signal strength. All the order members' eyes were closed, so they couldn't see what I saw. It was a figure walking just outside their circle, outlined in the blue light. His coat had an oversized hood that hid his face entirely as he moved toward Ralphagon. He came too close as he passed behind a burly man with dark brown skin and thick eyeglasses. A ripple formed in the blue glow below them. That ripple disrupted the bespectacled man's concentration and triggered his formula. A fierce rumble rolled out from behind him as the ground shook. Everyone dropped their hands and opened their eyes. But when the blue glow faded, The hooded figure mysteriously vanished. I was the only one who'd seen him. The book dropped into Ralph Vaughan's fingers. Robertitis? Robertitis Charlesus groaned and adjusted his glasses. I'm sorry, Ralph Vaughan, I couldn't help myself. It's not your fault, Ralph Vaughan said. Something disrupted our circle. Everyone looked at Merman Vini, who shook his head. I didn't do anything, I swear. Loisana pointed into the distance. Look at the path. There was a jagged tear across the trail a few hundred yards from the clearing. The chasm was at least 40 feet across. It's fine, Ralph Vaughan said, but he frowned. We never enter on that side of the clearing. Besides, Dunkerhook Woods takes care of itself. By the time we resume our meetings, the damage will probably be gone. The Order members milled about. They discussed possible vacation plans and bemoaned now useless supplies of cotton swabs. They all lived in town, so they'd see plenty of one another, but there was still an air of sadness. Merman stood apart. He glowered briefly at Ralph Vaughan and then stared off into the clearing as if searching for something or someone. Eventually, the Order members zipped up their raincoats, tugged on their hoods, and marched down the trail toward the border of Van Silas Way. Ralph Vaughan was still frowning and looking vaguely puzzled. The rain started again on the street. The gateway reappeared, and one by one the Order members filed through, and they went home. Nobody noticed that Merman Vini lingered in the woods, standing off to the side behind a tree. Sir, are you there? He said once the others had left. Vini, you moron! A toneless, echoing voice boomed out of the empty air as if somebody was shouting into a large, invisible bucket. What if they notice you didn't leave? If one of them came back, they'd hear and thus be able to see me. As the words rang out, the speaker became visible. It was the hooded figure. He was completely covered by a black coat. His hood covered his head like a huge shadowed cave. There was no sign of a face. For the second time that day, Merman had to apologize. I'm sorry, sir. I was worried. Won't the Order disbanding ruin our plans? The hooded head shook from side to side. Exactly the opposite. This is all part of my plan. In a few more days, we will strike. Then we will have the power, and I will have my revenge. But no more nonsense like threatening Ralph Vaughan. Control your bad judgment from now on and await my signal. Now go. Merman Vini nodded and left through the waiting gateway. The hooded figure disappeared. Soon after, the gateway vanished. The rain stopped, and all was quiet in the woods once again.